I think we can start. Good evening, everyone. And after 6 months of intensive and incredibly enriching work, it's a great pleasure to see people that would like to learn more about the AWC Journal. We wanted this event to strike a balance between a formal presentation and an informal discussion, something that feels essential when we're talking about such a complex and deeply intelligent topic as infrastructures. And firstly, I would like to introduce today's panelist. To begin with me, with myself, my name is Antonina Stebur. I'm a curator and researcher, and I'm as well as co-founder of the International Coalition of Cultural Workers in solidarity with Ukraine. And I'm also editor-in-chief of the first issue of the AWC Journal that have a little bit sophisticated title, Entanglement of Infrastructures, Civilian System under the Pressure of Militarization. And I'm also glad to introduce my partner in crime together, Tatiana Kochubinska. Together with Tanya, we created the first issue of this journal. And Tatiana is an art historian, independent curator, and she made a lot of important contemporary exhibition all over the world. And of course, I would like to point out your key role in the shaping of this editorial version of our journal. And of course, our authors, the Oleksii Minko is a writer and a disciplinary artist who originally from Berdyansk, but now he lives in Kiev, and he works in the intersection of art theory and political philosophy. And personally, for me, his contribution that dedicated to colonization and weaponization of the topic of infrastructure of home and intimacy infrastructure was very important, not only in the frame of this journal, but in a more wider context. And there also, I would like to introduce eeefff group. Dina and Nikolai is an artistic collective critically exploring digital labor, value extractivism, as well as infrastructural politics. They made contribution to our journal. They work in the frame of their art practices. They worked collectively with leaked Yandex code, but probably a little bit later, they could talk a little bit more about their artwork. And of course, I'm really glad to introduce Hanna Paniutsich. She's a multimedia artist from Belarus, but now she's based in Scotland. And she focuses on intersection between technological issue and power dynamics. And for this journal, she made an incredible contribution that somehow connected on the one hand to her personal story, like draw a pun of her personal story, but at the same time, she wrote about important political issue that connected to Chernobyl zone. And of course, last but not least, my friends and colleagues, Natasha Chychasova. She's a curator and researcher, and she was born in Donetsk, but in 2014 she had to flee, and now she based in Kiev, where she works as a head of contemporary department of the Mistecki Arsenal in Kiev. Of course, well, and now when I started to introduce all the panelists, I noticed that all of us have the refugees and migrant experience. I think that it's very important to notice in the frame of our journal, because it's somehow to define the author and researcher standpoints. It means this migration point can be like in the migration or just to move from one country to another. And of course, the reason of that wasn't just a pleasant. This is connected to the usually to the political repressions and the war. And unfortunately, due to the time and their format limitation, we couldn't invite all the contributors, but their crucial thoughts and research will be available. You can available to read in our journal, the first issue. But I tried to mention, I and Tanya tried to mention all of them. And as well, I would like to express my gratitude to our partners. The first issue of the art of the Anti-War Coalition Journal um, has been made possible by the Nordic Media Grant Program for Belarus, supported by the Nordic Council of Minister Office in Lithuania. And I would like to extend special thanks to our colleagues from Ambasada Kultury. And before we start to our discussion part and our presentation part, I would like to outline how our presentation will proceed. First of all, Tatiana and I will begin introduce the journal and the core conceptual framework. After that, our contributors will present their key ideas and project featured. They talk a little bit more about their contributions, their the context of their contributions, that it helps us to understand better the topic and the forced fields of the first issue. And finally, we will have a Q&A session where we ask all of you to ask question, and you can leave your question in the YouTube chat. You can do it during the presentation of the contribution or my presentation and Tatiana, or after the presentation part. I understand that probably YouTube chat is not the most of interactive tool, but it's better than nothing, as we understand. And now that the technical details are out of the way, let's to return to the journal itself. Wow. Looking back, it's almost surprising for me that the idea of launching a journal has materialized only now, 2 years after the foundation, the International Coalition of Cultural Workers in Solidarity with Ukraine. Because from the very beginning, one of the key goals of the coalition was to use contemporary art as a tool, as a mean to connection different geographies, topic, creating a space for reflections on our complexity of the complexities of the war, repressions, power dynamics, and as well as try to understand the strategies of resistance and solidarity. Personally, all the time I started to think in between personally and politically point of view. And personally, I remember that at the beginning of the full-scale invasion Russia to Ukraine, I felt like speechless. I feel like I had lost my language. And of course, I felt as if there is no word to fully capture this interwoven nature of violence, oppressions, and wars entanglement. But also, I felt that we need to find somehow to practices of resistance and solidarity, different collective and collaborative and different coalitions. But at the same time, I felt that I lost my language, and this why our discursive event, exhibition, researches that we organized for these last 2 years, and especially I would like to highlight the exhibition that we made in Kharkiv last year in Yeremilov Center, Sense of Safety. All these exhibitions, and especially the exhibition in Kharkiv, have always had a strong conceptual and analytic component. And now with this journal, we hope to create or to continue to create, because I'm really believe that the creation is not just, this is like long-term processes, and to create the space for reflection and knowledge production. And why it's important, I would like to refer to the quote of the Belarusian professor Almira Usmanova that she had pointed out. I just read the quote. It seems to us that thinking can happen almost anywhere, but places still matter. Source is always connected to a place. And the end of quote. And I sincerely hope that AWC Journal can become such a place that we can collectively think, exchange ideas, develop new framework for understanding our nowadays reality, that it's not, that becomes a little bit more worse than worse, to tell the truth. And more that I strongly believe that in the face of right-wing political shifts, the rise of techno-oligarchy, control, and ongoing violence of wars, not war, but wars and repressions, that such of creation of space for collectively thinking and knowledge sharing, or some building of network, is not just an important, but it's a crucial this is like a crucial and necessary strategy for survival. And that's why the first issue, Entanglement of Solidarity, somehow to draw upon how we can create the space for reflection and how we can create the space for knowledge sharing. But our first issue was strong focus because it's dedicated to the militarization of civil infrastructures, a topic that crucial but often, as I think, overlooked. And probably for those who knows me personally, this topic, the choosing of the topic of infrastructure is not might not come as a surprise, because I'm a little bit obsessed of infrastructure. And just small fun facts about myself, that my colleagues even created a separate Telegram chat where they count how many times I say the word infrastructure. But this is just a joke. But the real reason why we choose this topic is that that infrastructure is to think about violence, war, system of oppression is really important through the optics of infrastructure, and especially through the idea how civil infrastructures from the very beginning militarized, to have this potentiality to be militarized. As well, in the very beginning of the world of infrastructure had this military potential, because as many other words, that somehow to shaped our nowadays situation. This word also appeared in a political point of view in Enlightenment era, as many other, because somehow how we understand our politics, how our different institutions really works, shaped by the Enlightenment philosophy somehow, and we somehow trapped to this Enlightenment view. And at the beginning of their first worldview, the term infrastructure, like a shaped in there, has this strong military meaning. So this means that the very concept of infrastructure is already interweaved with the militarization. And that's why I would like to point out what we think when we say infrastructure. Infrastructure for us are not just a technological system. They are mostly like a relational network. They don't just exist as a physical object, I don't know, like roads, pipelines, or data center, but also the system, the structure, how we moved, how we interact, how power operates. And this is important point, why infrastructure is really important, because infrastructure is what allows to other things functions, and that makes it incredibly powerful and organizing the force. And that's why infrastructure from the very beginning is not natural. They are deeply entangled in the economical system, in a system of oppression, exploitation, both human and non-human agency, and they shape our labor, environmental destruction, and so on. And as Deborah, as one of the most important researcher when we talk about infrastructure, Deborah Cohen, who wrote a lot of numerous of articles and books, she puts her own understanding of political framework of infrastructure. I just read the quote. Infrastructures reach across time, building uneven relation of the past and the future, cementing their persistence. The end of quote. And in other words, infrastructure that doesn't serve the present moment. They somehow to extend the historical, the history of colonization, occupation, and war into the future. And very often they reinforcing this inequality and control. And we in our issue we also have the term the ruins of infrastructure. Even when infrastructure ruined, it very easily can be reinforced this military or powerful relationship. It's also important. And but at the same time, except the repressive mechanism of infrastructure, the first issue of AWC Journal is about ask about their potentiality. We set the set of question, for example, such as if infrastructure are instruments of control, can they also be instrument of resistance, and how do we reclaim and reimagine them for solidarity and survival? And now this is like very briefly our framework of the whole online journal, AWC Journal, and a little bit about the concept of the first issue. And I would like to pass the floor to the Tatiana Kochubinska. She probably talk a little bit more about the how we try to connect the analytical or theoretical point of view in our journal with artistic approach, and and a little bit about her own contribution in our journal. So Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. You can hear me? Yeah, just a test. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. So thank you, Antonina, for your first introduction. And thank you everyone who is joining and listening to us online via YouTube. And yeah, it's a very important moment for us. I mean, for the whole Antiwarcoalition.art. And we are very pleased that we are launching the first issue of the Antiwarcoalition Journal. And for us, it's a very important step in our activity because it's given like a new milestone. And as Antonina mentioned about the creation of the Antiwarcoalition that appeared in 2022 as a response toward the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. And since then, we have made a lot of different projects like screenings, exhibitions, discussions, and creating a journal, which is our first issue right now. And this inauguration is very important for us because it's, as I said, it's becoming a new milestone in our activity. And we do hope that this milestone will be sustainable in our activities, that every year we will be able to produce one or maybe in the future 2 issues. And with this issue, we also think of the journal generally, that it will be a space for exchange. And we do hope it will work, will function in this way, that it will be given you possibilities to like better understanding or reflecting towards the times and these complexities that we are living through. And of course, now I would like also to thank all the contributors and the authors and the whole team, all our team that made this issue possible. And I would like also to elaborate a bit on the topic, as Antonina mentioned, that I will be talking more about this combination of artistic approach and practical activity of the anti-war and issue. I would like to emphasize that the issue, the journal and the topic of this journal, of the first journal, on the one hand, as Antonina mentioned, that she's obsessed with infrastructures. So that is why, of course, we have this theoretical approach, but at the same time, it's very important to mention that the idea of this first issue, which is connected to the entanglements of the infrastructures, is largely shaped by the activities of the anti-war coalition, as discussions and screenings, exhibitions. So basically, this topic was haunting us all the time in different locations, as for example, when we were working in VetKM, in Center for Media Arts in Karlsruhe, of course, his presence and understanding that this building, this beautiful building and this amazing institution for media art, that the building was built as a weaponry. So on every step of our activities and different things that we were doing and producing together in partnership with different institutions or artist-run spaces, this question, how civilian infrastructures or military infrastructures were transformed into civilian and vice versa, it's something that we always were facing. And as Antonina mentioned, the project, our recent huge project, Sense of Safety, that happened in Kharkiv and across Europe. With this project, it was important for us to show the global interconnectedness of the whole world through people, communities, systems, and of course, infrastructures. And also this topic of how to say, like, oscillating infrastructures is evident in these practical activities, but at the same time on our digital platform, Antiwarcoalition.art, and many videos, many works which are presented there are also dealing with these topics. So basically for the 3 years of, already that nearly 3 years of the anti-war coalition, its topic which is very much present and follows us. As for example, in the video by the Ruins Collective, which is present on our digital platform, Ruins Collective from Kiev, and their work, which is called Endless Sea of Sand, which was made in 2023. And basically this video work focuses on the Russian occupation of the Zaporizhia nuclear power station and in the city of Enerhodar, and the city which is still under occupation. And for example, with this video, they show how this peaceful atom infrastructure, which was a symbol of Soviet modernity, is now being used as a threat. And also we understand that it's always under threat and being when the nuclear power station is under occupation. So it might bring to like broader environmental destruction. And the symbol of modernity is being turned into the tool of blackmail and also ecological blackmail. And this is one of the examples that followed us and really brought us to this topic of the infrastructures. And another example that I would really like to emphasize, it's something that we were talking in between our team all the time, and it relates to this project Sense of Safety in Kharkiv that we all relate right now because in my perspective, and I think like for all of our team, it was very important project. And we made this exhibition, Sense of Safety, and a broader project that was happening across Europe with different partner institutions. But it's important, this project happened in Kharkiv, in the northeast of Ukraine, and it was made in very close collaboration with the Yermilov Center. It's an art institution that today also serves the certified bomb shelter. And for example, when we were preparing this project and when we immersed ourselves in a local context, we discovered the fact that, for example, the products of the Kharkiv Institute of Scintillation Materials are being used in the developments of a new hadron collider. So again, it emphasizes this idea of interconnectedness in the world, but at the same time of this change in infrastructures, because with a full-scale invasion, for example, the scientists in this institute were forced to repurpose their infrastructure, which originally was intended for innovation and research, but with the war, they were forced to repurpose this existing infrastructure to everyday needs. And for example, this shift, infrastructural shift, was also documented in a series of photographs by Kharkiv photographer Alexander Osipov, which is called Shelter for Science. And we also invited Alexander to contribute to our issue, because it was also important for us to combine and to have this balance in between theoretical inquiries and to emphasize what is going on right now. And this series of photographs in the issue is brought together with an essay by Marina Koneva. Marina Koneva, a curator and an art historian based in Kharkiv, who was also a co-curator of our Sense of Safety project. And in our inaugural issue, for us, it was very much important somehow to emphasize this practical activity and to touch upon also the sense of safety. And now it's one of the contributions in our journal, where, for example, the text by Marina and the series by Alexander go hand in hand, and they brought together, they also explore these possibilities of mutual support in times of war. And now I'm coming to this diversity of genre in our issue. So for us, it was important to keep this dynamic. As I said, that for example, this photographical series is being accompanied with the text. So at the end, they create in a different format of a contribution, but at the same time, throughout the whole issue, for us, it was important to keep this diversity to keep this diverse range of contributions. So we have a lot of visual essays, we have theoretical inquiries, schemes, and interview. And another important point that we invited some of the authors, but at the same time, we were happy that we could launch an open call. The open call, it was a really important part of the issue, because through the open call, we could show more perspectives and voices. And we do believe that with the open call, we keep our journal more dynamic. And I think, and for Antonina and for me personally, we discovered new scholars and new names and new researchers by the means of the open call. And also the open call has given the possibility to expand on the geography. So maybe we will have a lot of contributions, for example, from Belarusian authors, a country which is maybe underrepresented, because when we talk about Belarus, we think about dictatorship, but we do think we should think also about this horrible human rights violation which is happening in the country, which is just here in Europe. So through the open call, as I said, we wanted to extend on the geography and to invite more researchers and scholars and artists. And I'm happy that through open call, we have contributions by Lisa Goncharenko and Sonia Isupova, who presented visual essays, and a theoretical inquiry by Nazar Galanich, and one more research text by Daria Hetmanova, which will appear in the end of February. So this all being put together. While combining this more practical aspect, maybe of these visual essays together with theory, we wanted to give more, to try to show more complexities and ideas regarding this entanglements of the infrastructures, and to explore how military infrastructures were transformed into civilian and vice versa. As for example, if we think of the context of Ukraine that we cannot ignore, of course, the ongoing war in Ukraine shows how civilian infrastructures are becoming most vulnerable. And exactly the civilian infrastructures, they are being weaponized and are used as tools of control and of control and even possible destruction. And it's very vulnerable for all of us. And maybe now I would like to give a word to Oleksii Minko, to give the digital floor to Oleksii to talk about his essay, which is called Temporal Occupation of Ukrainian Housing by Russia. So where you focus on the home infrastructure, which is on the one hand, it's a very personal place, but at the same time, under occupation, home infrastructure is becoming a tool of control. So please, Oleksii, I'm happy to give a word to you to present your contribution to our issue.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, I will show some slides.
Of course.
Okay. Say to me if they will disappear. I will fix it. So I'm really happy to be in this issue. I'm honored to be published here, and the idea of this issue actually helped me to find the topic that I can contribute to the critique of military violence and global injustice, and to be useful for my people, at least in this. And my text, as it was said, comes from my experience as an internally displaced person whose close ones are still under Russian occupation. They not only still live, but some of them are dying there. Except for one of my closest creatures that I mentioned in the text directly. Last year, in the end of last year, I lost one of my grandmas. For more than a decade, she was struggling with the effects of stroke, mostly isolated and alone, which is my fault too. But I never repay my debt to her in person because of Russian imperialistic aggression. What I can do is to dedicate my talk to her resilience, to her care, and to thank her because I able to read and write because of her. This is what she taught me. And do you see that the slide is changing? Yeah, super.
Yes.
Thank you. So as an internally displaced person, I want to come back home. It is not the thing that everyone understands, that someone from the country at war wants. And paradoxically, except the Ukrainian government, which can use it, is this desire to inspire me to join the resistance, it is used by the Russian government as well, but a little differently and in a more complex way. Through the affect of longing for one's belongings that are inaccessible, Russia manipulates the need of people to save their housing, pushing them to pay for it with their identity, safety, and sanity. Sorry. I see the actions of the Russian government as the occupation of infrastructure of intimacy, of relations with domestic space developed in time with the help of collective investment of emotions and resources. I took this term from a Palestinian researcher, Sabrian Amrov, that applies this feminist concept of Ara Wilson to the context of Palestine. In parallel, I describe how the Russian tradition of bureaucratic colonialism, this is the term of Willard Sunderland from his book on Russian colonial history, how this tradition shapes the form of oppression that is used in the Ukrainian southeast today. In my text, I describe the forcing of Ukrainians on occupied territories to change their documents by manipulating the right to ownership. The Russian approach to the occupied Ukrainian housing targets not only the people who still live there, but who were evacuated or migrated. The danger of losing your domestic space in which you or your ancestors invested so much of your life, your and their life, scares people to the extent that they are ready to go through the hell of bureaucratic pressure and dangers to save it. Most people attempts to come back to occupied territories are withdrawn by FSB officers, and the process of transition to home becomes the physical and psychological torture in the filtration camp that is now located in Sheremetyevo airport. The logistics of returning are structured as torture that is teach Ukrainians to subjugate, be assimilated, or be ashamed for being Ukrainian. If you failed on this path, and from my text you can find that it is easy to fail there, your property is declared ownerless. Russians do not hesitate to buy it or to rent seaside apartments, even if the buildings were shot and partially destroyed, and of course without any troubled conscience to the account of killed, kidnapped, or deported people that lived there before the invasion. This complex and chaotic structure works for the main goal of settler colonialism: to erase the presence of an alternative past and erase the traces of other, which lead to control over the possible and imaginable. Temporarily is what Ukrainians trying to affirm in the community when they call the occupied territories temporarily occupied territories. They claim that there will be the time of an uncut local timeline, free from the exclusive metropolitan time of conquerors that is echoing their expansionist achievements to keep the enemy in a state of despair. Meanwhile, Russia sustains the speed of expansion and roots deeper with its settler ambitions, building new infrastructures and appropriating or destroying the old ones, including the infrastructure of intimacy. These new spaces or spaces that were taken away work also as scissors that cut hope for returning and deoccupation. This is the infrastructure that appears to remind you that you do not belong here anymore, you are not welcomed here, and actually you are never were here. Russia built its own cognitive and emotional infrastructures inside the oppressed bodies who experience the loss of their native environment, reproducing fear that hunts in dreams and directing actions that are fruitful for the flowing of colonial temporality. Despite this, I don't know how it's a miracle that should be described in other texts. Resistance and counterattacks are taking place, and millions of people opposing Russian sneakiness and brutality with desperate belief and exhausted agency. It is too early to rely on new populist governments that are promised to end Russian aggression without the militant participation of allies or a radical increase in support of Ukraine. In Ukraine, after years of disappointment about double standards abroad, people depend on themselves, and I depend on them. I hope the meaning of this dependence also makes sense to you who listen us. And if it is, I ask you to donate to the fundraiser of the artist from the frontline that collecting money for the repairing of FPV drone studio. Its functioning will help the battalion be effective on the front line and keep people safe. And in the end of my talk, I want to thank Antonina Stebur for the supportive and enriching editing of the text, and also send love to my work in progress community, which helped me to find sources and choose the topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just add one thing. As well as I was an editor of this article, I wrote this article for, I don't know, for numerous time. And for me personally, it was, and it still is, a very essential text as well, because how you can bring together his personal perspective and the broad political and military concept, but as well as I also think about the concept of slow violence that apply to intimacy sphere. I think that's really important, because usually when we think about home, due to movie industry or cultural industry, we think about home as something pleasant. But sometimes when we talk about colonization or militarization structures, the idea of home becomes dangerous and produce slow violence. And I really appreciate how you combine this like personal, economical and political context together. I think it's really important, because it helps us to understand that when we talk about the militarization of civil infrastructures, it means that even so close to us structure as a house or home in dangerous. So thank you so much. And I also would like to introduce eeefff to continue to talk about some not so obviously sphere for militarization, because usually when we talk about technology, of course, technology very deep involved in the military sphere, but at the same time, when we talk about the coding process of everyday usage technology, as I don't know, like searching, or I don't know, as digital assistants and so on, usually we don't notice how this algorithm militarized or weaponized or code violence. And personally, for me, the art practice of eeefff is a good is a good example. Not good, probably it's not a proper word, but it's an important example how we can bring together, on the one hand, how we can use artistic tools and instruments, but at the same time organize different collective workshop, and as well as use it for forensic things, because what's eeefff do, but probably they talk better than I describe themselves. So, but for me, the artworks that produced by the School of Algorithmic Solidarity and the contribution Can Colonialism Be Encoded very important and a little bit terrifying, because it's and essential, because it's present a forensic study that reveals how warfare and colonial logic are embedded in a deepest level of technological infrastructure. So, and this is platform are not natural. Especially today, nowadays, this point, after the Trumps and all this techno oligarchy situation, are very, unfortunately, are very understandable for us. So, Dina and Koля, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Antonina. So we would like to ask you, Antonina, to put our video maybe first. While you do so, I will quickly introduce that the contribution that we were making to the issue of anti-war coalition is a script for the video. Yes, and now let's first watch a small extract of around 2.5–3 minutes.
This file contains settings for an electronic assistant. Electronic assistants are boxes that install corporate algorithms inside of private spaces. Users of these devices have different attitude towards them. Boxes are made a fetish in different ways. Sometimes by their appearance, sometimes by inner electronics. The file is stored at the folder Hollywood and then at the folder Fast Data. The file contains conditions that determine the behavior of the electronic assistant. For example, morning or evening, winter or spring. Is user an adult or a child? Is it necessary to show only news from Belarus, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and Russia? Is it New Year now? The conditions are usually explained to children through visual metaphors.
We know our fuzz is going to roll in the direction we tell it to.
So if we say go right, then it will move right until it hits a wall.
If we want our fuzz to turn, we can say if purple, then turn down. The arrow command goes on top of the condition tile. So if purple, then turn down. After that, we can complete the maze. Notice how the fuzz changes directions? Now it's your turn.
Conditions, conditions. We use conditions all the time. But what are conditions? They are things that decide.
At the screen, you see one of the conditions. Control of behavior of the electronic assistant in case of war. Changing this parameter is the responsibility of a programmer. 0. Electronic assistant behaves in a way as if there is no war. 1. The algorithms of wartime are on. Here is a simulator of the work of IT industry. Here it is possible to increase productivity endlessly.
Thank you, Antonina. And so it's one excerpt from our video that we were making, and the context is the leakage of one of the IT companies that is connected to the Russian government called Yandex, and they have different services, including electronic assistant, as being told here, including taxis, delivery systems, mails, maps, and other infrastructures that they're trying to impose on different territories. So our kind of approach was to look for some patterns of what we call digital colonialism or algorithmic, let's say, fascism, and to see, to try to find in everyday machinic operations on everyday level something that was programmed or something that is part of this algorithmic system being encoded, and to find if there are some already traces of the ongoing Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, because this code was leaked already in July 2022 and published in internet in 23rd year. So it's possible kind of to find the power politics behind this code. And Kolya, you can talk more about engine that we made and sessions, collective sessions.
Yeah, thank you, Dina, for this explanation. Yeah, and I think it's worth to add that yeah, the leak code is about 60 gigabytes in file in size, and to dig inside, we decided to make a content engine, because usually people who work with this leakage were interested into either cybersecurity or some commercial things, trying to find a way how to optimize in other instruments that are similar in their application or structure or infrastructure. And our interest was maybe was into the topic if we can find some traces of the mechanisms of inclusion and exclusion that are algorithmically driven. And because the company which is connected to the Russian government tried to operate on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine, for example, mobilizing their labor force of potential taxi drivers, organizing for them some sorts of examination, trying to find the people who are like either loyal or according to the company competent to be either a taxi driver or delivery worker. And what is important for us when we are looking inside of the algorithmic structures is that you can find there not only the traces of what already happened, but also what is not yet established, what is not very stable, but you can see this the leap to the future. It's to some extent you can say this is like a materialized science fiction, but the science fiction of the ego, or science fiction of the structures and agents that are oppressors and invaders. And according to the video we've shown you, this is important to say that the presence of this device, I mean this electronic assistant, with this condition of the war installed inside, this is like a sign how deep into everyday life this algorithmically organized composition of exclusion and inclusion is implemented.
And maybe I can add that we were making different collective reading sessions because at one point we understood that we cannot like read through the whole codes alone, and we were invited by different people, including Gribnitsa, by Antonina, to kind of try to work effectively but also effectively with these codes, and what actually how this code can be also kind of the basement for discussions about some patterns of digital colonialism, and also part of everyday people's situations that can be also parallel to what they experience in some other services. So it's also kind of this machine of producing this infrastructural monopolization that tries to dig in the bodies of people who are using these structures.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you, Antonina, for example, to host our reading sessions in during because during them we can find a way how to properly narrate this. Because to make a contra engine is only one step, and another one is to find the way how to conduct this, how to find the way how to make a counter narrative. Yeah, and we ended up to this video, and in the journal you can read the script for several of them, I think 10 of them, with different chapters based actually on one of files we found there that are, according to our opinion, are symptomatic. Symptomatic in a way that they can show this entanglement of algorithms and materiality of oppression, materiality of occupation or exploitation. But because of immateriality of this and abstraction of this mechanisms and obscurity, some sort of didactic materials are needed. And at this point, we decided, okay, maybe the didactic videos that can accomplish the situation of reading or the situation of conscience rising could be helpful. Yeah. And we are very happy that Antiwarcoalition.art provides us this possibility to share these scripts. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for uncovering these encoded traces of geopolitics, and it's seemingly abstracted and immaterial, but de facto in our lives and can be very much present and even tangible. And now I would like to give a word to Hanna Paniutsich with her essay where she, Hanna will talk more about this, but where she talks about this aftermath of the nuclear infrastructures, which is also has such a huge impact on our lives, but also similarly abstracted and invisible. But we do understand that at some point it can be very much intervening our physical lives. So Hanna, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I guess I will start talking about point of view, my personal point of view and how this text came up, and my personal experience that my family, part of my family comes from the exclusion zone, and after the Chernobyl disaster, they were displaced from this territory. And yeah, I guess this had some kind of impact on my life, and I always wanted to go there. And yeah, and basically this text was born from this experience. But yeah, I was also interested how this yeah, how this territory was used as a first like kind of point of entry um, uh, during the first days of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and how it was kind of these histories were interconnected, and yeah, obviously this text is based on the publication that I made last year. It's called Выпромёнивание, which means radioactivity, and basically it's the text for AWC Journal is kind of a collage from this publication, and it combines like personal stories and histories and more like theoretical parts. And I kind of like call it like the view from the exclusion zone, and I basically use this view to show different interdependencies. And I think we talked today a lot about infrastructure, but for me also, I'm thinking about this word like ecosystems, and how maybe this word is interconnected with infrastructures in many ways. And yeah, and this word ecosystem actually comes from nuclear testing, because they were looking how the radioactive pollution can influence all the systems. And I feel like it was infrastructure is definitely like supports this idea of ecosystem. And yeah, and like yeah, we can't really see radioactive pollution, and it's also was a big thing for me that it stays invisible. And for a long time, scientists thought that radiation can't go like very deep into the ground, but then they found like sinkholes, and the radiation would go like 1 kilometer deep. And I call this thing also like routing, and like finding these connections and how the radiation spreads, and has been found in many places, at least like in Europe. There are patches of radiation in Sweden, and is still found in Moss, and also in Scotland, where I'm from, and how this pollution, like, and now the war pollution, how like it basically spreads around the globe, and yeah, and how it's also becomes invisible and like visible in many ways. And I was also thinking about like this term decolonization, and I was thinking like, oh, how can we like decolonize exclusion zone? And obviously it's like it has radiation, and is they're developing ways of basically reclaiming this land back, but it's almost impossible with certain parts to do that, because a lot of estimations um, for yeah, decomposition of different isotopes, they're just been like calculated, but actually we don't know how long it's gonna take for yeah, for them to decompose. And yeah, so I was thinking like how to think of decolonization if there is some pollution that it makes it really hard to clear the land. And also thinking about war pollution, because yeah, war pollution is definitely associated like with heavy metals, and it's really hard to remove this pollution from the soil and water. So yeah, I was thinking about this term called de-alienation, and it comes from this idea of like alienation zone. And it's also interesting that in English, like alienation zone and exclusion zone is used, because there is, I guess, this kind of complexity of translation. And obviously, like, this text is very much connected to my art practice, because I also made like a video piece and a physical computing installation where it shows this prolonged time of radioactive pollution. And with this text, I'm thinking, like, is like the whole world becoming an exclusion zone, basically, because of the pollution that happens. Thanks.
Thank you, Hanna. And I just noticed that I really appreciate that how you connect the idea, how you show that the idea of like a peace anthem that all the time developed in the ideological point of view during the Soviet era, and not only in Soviet system. I remember that in USA had the same when they promote the idea of peace anthem, but at the same time, how you show that this is place from the very beginning was strongly military space. And that's why today, after the 2022, during the occupation of Chernobyl, this like military potentiality was reactive again. And the second idea that usually we think about exclusion zone, but really, you have already mentioned it. I just would like to point out that this is zone not an isolated. This radiation all the time, how to say, came out of this space through the water, through the mushrooms. I don't know, distributing of foods. I don't know, or during their animals migration paths and so on, so on. And that's why it's good example that nothing is island. It means that how we really interdependence of each other, and that's why it's not only the problem of this isolated zone. Thank you for that. And to return to the topic of isolation, I would like to introduce my friends and colleagues, Natasha Chychasova and frankly speaking, when we started to think about the first issue of the Anti-War Coalition Journal, we start to think from the very beginning of the topic of изоляция. This is a former Soviet factory that was reinvented as an art space, and now Izolatia is the most terrifying prison in occupied Donetsk. And we invited Natasha to write text about the situation, and probably I even cannot imagine how difficult it was to write this text for Natasha, as well as she was born and lived in Donetsk till 2014, and that's why so all of this article somehow to connected personal experience and political experience. But what's important for me, that Natasha not only described this terrifying and torture history of Izolatia, but what's really important for me, that she is tried to think about how we can create alternative infrastructures, So, Natasha, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Thank you so much, Antonina, for such a beautiful introduction, and many thanks for having me today and this opportunity to write this text. And maybe, as usual, started from the little personal story. Like when I was a kid, I very good remember that my father, as a historian, told me a lot about the different wars which like happened in the past, such I don't know, in the Middle Ages or about the Second World War II. But I have this very clear moment when he tell me the story about the Bosnian War, and in this particular moment, I understood that couldn't imagine how such thing would happen in such a recent past. And I also didn't fit in my head that the war will go into all of the world. And my imagination wasn't capable to realize that one day I will be like writing about the war which I'm witnessing right now. I like when I wrote this text, in some way I feel like I'm a doctor who look on the big wound and try to stitch it, but I'm not succeed in this at all. And so yeah, this topic is quite difficult for and because of different like aspects of this. And so this is in this text I try to like tell the story of Izolatia, which is Antonina mentioned. It was the Soviet factory in Donetsk which produced isolated materials. But after in 2000s, this place was revitalized, and the Izolatia was rebuilt as an art platform, which was one of the biggest in the eastern part of Ukraine, one of the biggest in whole of Ukraine. And in quite short period of time, it became a place where artists from all of Ukraine and all of the world and local culture workers can meet and like know more about each self practice and can create the art specifically for this place, like because the main idea of Izolatia was work was the work this particular history of the this place and ironically, the Izolatia located on the street which called Svitlый Шлях. It's translated as the bright way. And as I mentioned, as Stanislav Aseyev mentioned, the Stanislav Aseyev is a Ukrainian writer who was a former prisoner of the Izolatia. He wrote it ironically, this street very soon become the street to hell. And in 9 June 2014, the armed militaries, including the Russian militaries, like seized this place, and they proclaimed that they want to use it for a storage for a weapon and for training of the soldiers. But in very short period of time, it transformed it to the prison. And according to the report of the Office of United Nations High Commission of the Human Rights, like approximately, it's very hard to calculate like direct numbers of people who were there and who live there now. But we know that it was almost 1,000, and in this particular place, the soldiers use such method of torture as beating and kicking, as a sexual violence, they use an electronic shock applied to the limbs, fingers, toes, and genitals, and as other numbers of the tortures which they used for the people who've been there. And in this text, I tried to as well receive how this post-Soviet plant who was built with the idea of the coming of the nuclear war, how this infrastructure, which like being here when it was built, you started use it for the new new goals of the militaries who occupied this place, and how the art art which was located in this place were destroyed because it was a symbol of the freedom and the because it was this kind of symbol, how they and how now in the situation of the full-scale invasion, the art tried to reinvent themselves and not be just the evidence of a war, and try to like reinvent themselves and become the tool for fundraising for the army, or using the other strategies how to be useful in the moment of war. And for me, mainly it was it is a text about how the evil which not punished like repeat itself every time, and we can see it very well on the example of Izolatsiya, because in 2020 Izolatsiya decided to back to the east of Ukraine. In Solidar is a small town in a Donetsk region, and now the Solidar is occupied by Russian military forces and completely destroyed. And now in the occupied territory appears new reasons for the locals, because there is some sort of a punishment for locals, and a tool for the occupied government to make people loyal and do not like talk more and not resist. So that is why for me it's important to like continue to speak how maybe it's important to all of the Ukrainians who can try to continue to talk through their tears and tiredness, but we understood that we cannot stop to do it, and we need to continue our work. And I'm really grateful to Antonina and Tatiana for the opportunity and support for writing, because it was really important and helpful for me. And without you two, this text was never appeared. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I just repeat that I even cannot imagine how difficult it was for you to write this text. And just one clarification, unfortunately, during editorial, I cannot mention, but I would like to mention now. For me, it was important because during our preparation of journal, I read a lot of about the collection of Salvador Allende in Argentine, or in Chile, in Chile in 70s. And the place where the exhibition of collection were held in Chile after the junta was was taken the power. This place was also not destroyed, but occupied by military structure and was invented to the reinvented as a military garrison. And when I read this situation, how the contemporary structure and as well as in Zalatia, there were also a lot of different art pieces. How they transformed very easily to the military and structure. I don't know, for me it was important to mention because it's also help us to understand that this is like a not only the case of Zalatia is not an exclusion. What's important, this is like a structural situation and how art involved in this to be part of the transformation, but at the same time, the end of your article was very emancipatory and give people a little bit more hope to talk how artists can resist and can create their own infrastructure. Thank you for for your presentation. And probably if you have any question, we will happy to answer. Unfortunately, we talk a little bit longer than we are planned, and probably yeah, we have just a question. Yeah, we have what if the first question is mostly Tatiana for us. What is the journal's main goal? What outcome do you hope for, or what product should emerge from its activity? Or it's all for artists and art cultural world? I just repeat. Probably I can start. I just repeat that my speech from the very beginning, just one mention that we, as well as international coalition, we all the time somehow to one of our important goal was in this create their space for thinking, reflection, knowledge sharing, and their journal helps us to create this space for more regular basis, and as well as article in I don't know, the articles and the text is have a little bit more different life long term in according of in comparison with discussion. And for me personally, to create space is really important. To create different spaces is really important because as I have already mentioned, I quote Almira Usmanova quotes that the process of thinking needs space, and especially now to create space to help understand better the current situation. Maybe Tanya, you also would like to add something.
Yeah, thank you for your question. For me, journal just gives also a different expansions of the activity of the Antiwarcoalition, because it started from creating a digital platform, and the platform, I wouldn't say that it's curated, so we have a lot of different voices. Like we have established artists, we have emerging artists, and for me, the journal is also a possibility. It's like a research tool. Because at some point during the 3 years of the Antiwarcoalition activity, we have received a lot of inquiries of different researchers asking context of the artist, or at some point our reactive activity, which was in the beginning, it was more reactive. It turned out to be a research instrument, and I think that with a journal we can't expand exactly on this. And following your question, what product should emerge? At the moment, like me personally, I don't know what type of product, but For example, with this open call, we discovered a few names of researchers, but also artists with whom it would be interesting to collaborate in the future, maybe creating exhibitions and following our project in Kharkiv, Sense of Safety, which has demonstrated this hybrid format of online and offline events. It's something that, for example, for me personally, it would be interesting to develop and to go further with this. And the last part of the question, is it for artists and art cultural world? Yes, I think it's focused on art. That is why we have Antiwarcoalition.art, and like this .art is really important. And we have still a few other questions. And there is a question from Miriam Thijs, an artist from Düsseldorf, who is also part of our coalition. Thank you so much for watching in your question. Miriam is asking, is a Yandex machine similar to Alexa? I think it's more a question to eeefff. Guys, it's for you. And then we have 3 more questions, but probably now first you would answer this question, and then we will continue to other questions.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, the specificity of this machine that we showed today is actually similar to other electronic assistants as Alexa, for example, but with just another name. So it's actually, these services are interesting for us as they also work as replicas of each other, right? As they try to monopolize affect but work always locally, and how these small devices installed in every home actually are carrying this politicized knowledge that was being programmed by people working for the company. Colleague, maybe you want to add?
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for this question. Yeah, I would like to add that yeah, this similarity is not only okay, aesthetically driven, but more like a logistically and infrastructural one. And for example, during our reading sessions, we discovered that the aim of the reading of the process of reading this code, the leaked one, is not only to reveal the hostility of the Russian government. It's more about revealing the symptomatic of hostility of many other algorithmically driven oppression regimes. And during some of our sessions, people from Palestine came and they found some way how they can start talk about this algorithmically aided violence, but in different contexts, which we think it's important to stress.
Thank you. Tony, you want to continue with questions, or I can continue?
No.
There are a few questions, and I think
I just answered by chat, on chat. I have already answered for several questions
in YouTube, so we don't need to answer anything, or do we?
I don't know. So there are a lot of questions, and probably I will answer because they are very particular. I will answer on YouTube probably after the stream, and I because they are just about their. We think about this journal mostly about the last question. We think about this journal mostly as a space for reflection, but in our platform, when we talk about not journal, but about artwork who that placed in our Antiwarcoalition.art platform, we have different artworks. Some artworks are very inclusive and understandable without any preparation and any experience and you don't need to be inside of the professional art to understand that, or to have good theoretical education. So we have different artworks, some of them very understandable, some of them require more, I don't know, more experienced. So this is how. But what about journal? They are mostly theoretical and analytical product, and that's why for us it's really important to create this framework and to think about how we can talk about the nowadays current situation. Yeah, that's all. This is the last question I answered. And probably I just add that in our journal we also have a lot of different, as Tatiana have already mentioned, we have a lot of different genre and type of text. For example, we have amazing texts by Aigerim Kapar about the Balkash Lake that wrote as a I don't know, as a speculative essay who help us that this is like a fictional essay, but fictional but not really. She wrote as well as she is in the future, because she wrote in the situation, she described the situation with Balkash Lake in a very poetic, but as well as not only poetic way from the 2015. So this text is also affordable for understanding. So there are a lot of text and different kind of text. So that it's, and probably, I think that we can finish our presentation because we're a little bit limit of our time. What do you think, Tanya?
I think so.
Thank you so much once again. And now our journal is available on our platform now. You can just download it as a whole PDF or just read online by article by article as you want, as you prefer. And thank you for our panelists for joining us and talk a little bit more about their contribution. And unfortunately for me, we couldn't invite every one of our contributors because all the text in this, of course, I'm a little bit in the situation. That's why I couldn't be so fair. But for me, all the text is important in this journal and helps us together. When they read it together, you can understand better what does it mean infrastructure, how this power dynamic really organized, and how we can resist or just disrupted this infrastructure. So just enjoy it for this reading and have a good evening. Tanya?
Yeah, and I would like also to thank all the panelists, and I would like also to thank the whole our team, as there are many people behind the process, especially Anna Chychasova and Maxim Minko, and also Valentina Kiselova and Alexander Komarov, for making this possible. And we do hope that the journal will be developing, that we will have more feedbacks. And of course, I would like to thank all the artists who are contributing to the Antiwarcoalition digital platforms, because exactly the works, and from the artworks, we also get inspirations for the topics and future topics. So we are looking forward for our new inquiries. Thank you so much.
And just 1 second, to continue the idea of to say thanks, I would like to add 2 names for thank you for Alana Felton, who who be our editor. She read all this text in to make it more readable. And as well as I would like to say thanks to our designer Andrei Stebur for these works that also very important to make this journal more visible. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for today.
Yeah, thank you a lot. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.